you hear the music, I can like keep it down low, and then maybe we don't get copyrighted, and I could just sit here and dance. This thought. Let me know, chat. Not assuming that people are already here. Why would you be? On a Sunday morning, when we had to get this in because Universe Unveiled has got their news coming up here shortly, and we got to beat that deadline and get everybody over there. I don't know why. It's habit, because I'm always sitting down with other people these days. All right, let me do my diligence here and get over to the chat for when somebody does hop in. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 34. I think we're gonna talk about maybe we're gonna talk about suffering. Isn't that a terrible, terrible topic? You see why I always have on the happy music? Because I don't believe in that word suffering. Let me make sure everything's working here. Oh, what the fuck Wow. Why did Riverside, Sarah? I'm going to have to send you some screenshots. Holy crap. All right. Hang on, everybody. Technical issue. Group shot. There we go. Riverside's genius. So apparently I currently have 5 notifications up on YouTube, or links. They're full on links is what they are. Okay, so we got to take a second here. I got to delete now that I've screenshotted. All right, don't delete the one we're on. Again, morning everybody, but this is happening every time with Riverside. Sarah, I don't know if you're in the chat, but I'm just saying I already sent you a screenshot. And now I got to delete 5 notifications real quick, guys. That's crazy. Okay, we'll get back on track. Everything's working there. Oh, there you are, Sarah. Yeah, exactly. So, and my chat's not working either up here. Yeah. I'll take a picture later, but my chat is nothing. But I got you guys here, so we'll rock and roll like that. Is that my personality, Catman? It's the Institute for Natural Philosophy. It's how Ricardo puts it, I was going to put that in the chat, but I could just say it. And see, I can't highlight your chat, guys. This blows. So I can't bring you up here. But yeah, it's Institute for Natural Philosophy, dude. You can answer that for him, Sarah. I know you've got the news coming up. So everybody, we've got another IFNP. It is not my personality type. I don't know, is it? I don't know if I have personality type. All of them, probably. Christos, when I got my first copy of the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual for Mental Illness, it's the thing, the doctors use. And, oh no, I'm going to have to go get a lighter, guys. I didn't light the fire. And we need the fire for this one. But I'll pick up right there with the DSM story. Hang on one sec. back. And my seat is really fucked up. What is that? There. That's better. All right. What's going on, Thoth? Listen, my chat handling capabilities here in Riverside are broken. I can't even see you guys. I'm going to try closing it down one time. And not the stream, obviously. What is going on there? Also, everything seems whacked. Wow. Huh. Screen got really large on me. All right, so let's bring you guys back up. Yeah, I got nothing, so we'll enter a ticket on that, as they say. But welcome, Thoth, Catman, Christos, and Sarah. Appreciate it, guys. This is going to be, again, like I said, a pretty quick one. We could call it another one of these thought experiment episodes where, I'm testing various ways and stimuli for creating, this platform here of mine where we're exploring both things within and without, and while much of it, because of the nature of the community we're building and the interests that everyone has, and naturally, of course, the things I'm working on in the material world, it tends to, lean towards that subject matter. However, sorry, it's an active house. You'll just have to deal with any background kitchen and, lots of people here, and it's morning time. Isabella just took off. They're going kayaking down the Coosa. DSM-5 is what, I'll get back on track here. But that is just sort of just, a furthering of that process of, trying to translate my experience into, well, what does translate mean? Into things that can be digested, by other people, right? So this is going to be a quick one of those. I kind of jumped on because I knew I'm up against my time limit. We've got like 50 minutes here at most to give everybody time to get a bite and get over and watch Universe Unveiled and join us in the chat for the news today. They were off last week. So, we got to get over there. So that's part of what's going on. Other than that, I'm going to light a fire. And we're going to talk just with a thought I had that came from some content I consumed earlier this morning, and we'll do that. We'll chat for a minute. Let me light a fire. Okay, there's one. Is one enough? No. Why would it be? Need a big fire pit to do this by, I'm often, I know the timing sucks for what I'm about to say, but I know I'm often accused would be one way to have received these, what I'm sure are compliments. But, when I get going on things that I'm sort of excited about, people will say, oh, it's like we're at church, and that's really the last vibe I'm going for, at least if you culturally have experienced church as I have, it's much more of a, by the campfire, by a large body of water would be at best the group aesthetic I'd be going for. So hence, let's keep the fires rolling with this. Okay, so the title says on suffering. Oh, let me get my mic stand in place. And it's technically, I guess for our regular watchers, you'd know, it's a series of books. We got a Graham Hancock book, and we got the DeSoto Chronicles, and we got, of course, the oldest known board game in the world. You got to have your Mancala around. I mean, it's a game you could literally make by the creek. You could just hollow out some bowls and dirt, and you get pretty rocks. And that's part of, like I've told you before, working on my own set, right? Anyhow, it's also a handy mic stand. And I might need, because this chair is taller, one more book. And appropriately, of course, it could be, it's the thickest, and that's what I'm going for. But Supernatural, Graham Hancock's work that touched on many of the themes we'll probably touch on here in this next 30-minute little, we'll see. Maybe it's 15, Not really here just to be here, you know what I'm saying? So we'll just see what comes. as we settle in. I really wish I could see you guys on chat, but listen, I got you right here. And I'm going to prop it right there. So I can't highlight you, but I can see you and I can answer you, verbally, etc. How's the lighting? Catman, I'm hydrating. Did you catch that? That was for you. Now, see, this could settle in and work, but it could just stick Vincent Price. Okay, I think we'll roll with it. At least you can see me a little bit, even though the shadow. But that's also campfire-like, isn't it? The light and the shadow. One of the, I guess, coolest early moments I had, before I got into all the evidence you're often seeing me present on, it began quite simply when I was experiencing something akin to suffering, going through my own trials, right? And I don't have to get into specifics. And generally, guys, when we're talking about things we're going to talk about now, I try to use words carefully. I do. And I like at the outset to say that, however this translates to your own experience, no matter what words I might use. If I use the word God, you can, and put in Chuck, it doesn't, right? As long as you're getting your understanding of what I'm saying, I know, one of the few things I know is that realities are realities without words or descriptors on them, and words and descriptors often can be limiters of these things, right? So just that's my only preface here, okay? So that this is something that, I'm going to relate from my experience, but obviously the hope of saying it to everybody here is that it somehow translates, and is useful to you, right? Cool. So when I would sit by a fire, I'll stay with that thread, and so I first, guys, before you come up with all this stuff, it begins by a creek, dealing with my suffering, that I was going through, right? The pain in my life, and without talking about specifics, we can talk about like levels of experience, what it was like for me. And you're talking the worst, a total erasure. The reason I use the words shamanic calling, right? Because it gets through to everybody this idea of everything being broken and taken and just getting you down to, so that then your real self can emerge, right? And so that process leads you through several of what heretofore you might have understood as the most devastating thing a person could go through, right? But now you've gone through 4 or 5, 6, of those experiences. And then it becomes something different, and then I guess that's kind of the end of it. Anyhow, right? So as I'm experiencing those, many of what led to moments that physically manifested as just absolute imagine trying to be by a creekside and not only just in tears and rage and pain, but also trying to like vomit out this suffering and this pain, this intense pain and destruction you feel like right now. It's so all you could do is try to vomit it out, and you do that with like tears and crying and screaming, right? Like a couple of those. And those are build-ups, there's always months and even a year of like, when will this, end, just to get to those, right? Terrible, painful stuff, right? Now, just before this, there's a saying that stuck with me from my time in those rooms of AA, and it was this one. I mean, many of them stuck. It was those sort of core principles that I used to keep myself, both afloat and then locked into this new reality that was unfolding in and behind and through this suffering. That's why, I like to use the word gate, right, for many things, because that can be in your conscious experience, is a good way for going, like, achievement or getting through, or it's the feeling. The feeling is of a gate, so it's a good word. So this suffering gate. But the thing that stuck with me from those rooms in AA, when you're going through all this, is that pain is necessary, suffering is optional, right? And so somewhere in the midst of you're locked in to suffering, you do start to see it sort of like when you go hiking through the woods and you encounter all these thorns, and you're getting into the thorns, man, and you're just getting ripped apart, but you're going that way, so you just keep going. But then you're like 30 minutes in and you're like, fuck, I gotta breathe. I gotta stop. Where are we going, And you get up and you look over the thorns, and it's like just as much as you've come through either way. So it's like you can either go back but either way, it's just a lot more of this, Right. So when you're locked in sometimes to that moment, that really resonates with you, that okay, that at a certain point I'm locked into understanding that that this pain is necessary. What I experience is pain because it's breaking down, and it will build anew, and so once you're committed to that process, you reach the inevitable point where you recall pain is necessary, suffering is optional, and you go, okay, for what part of all of this, am I responsible? Can I still just wake up tomorrow and realize it's now, and God's here and we're all good, and this thing is, at least in the past, even if I'm dealing with the ramifications, or even if some in the future that's torturing me, that all is well. So I'm gonna say hello to chat, and we'll get back to that thought line. What? Just really waking up? Oh, good for you, man. Pain shows you that you're capable of experiencing emotions. There is that too, if you or yes, there is that too, the amount of emotion and tears that come quite necessarily through this process, through the many, many deaths of this process of constant change that we're all engaged in, whether we acknowledge it or not, yeah. That, let me continue, that somewhere when you're locked into that thorn field, it's a good analogy. Analogies work here too, another analogy that works and that resonates, and that people often, I guess, either misinterpret or just don't, take the time with, is words of Christ that come to us, where he says, "Take up your cross and follow me." Right? Well, I mean, to me, obviously, even in that right there, he's saying what he's doing. He's saying, my example is a map, right? And when I was in all of this, that's the one thing I needed, was a map. And while it's not the most specific map ever laid out, it does, in my experience, when you read it as such, cover it all, cover it all. And it gets you there, gets you here. It was my map. It was the only map that I was going to be able to walk forward with. If that map didn't work and didn't say what I read it to say it would do, then fuck this place. That's like where I was at. And so I put myself in a position through this pain and through these sufferings to do many things, to learn to detach objectively, to be able to look back at my narrative and dissect it, and dissect where my pain and my suffering, where that line was, right? And then learning which parts were optional to this process that I'd committed to. You're in those thorns, man. You're looking ahead, and it's just all thorns. Okay, and I'm using moments I've been in, right? Me and poor Luna. But of course, Luna is a little German Shepherd. She's, she'd just go anywhere, never notice shit. But we'd be sitting there, and you have that moment, man, where you can feel as defeated as a human being can feel. I mean, for 5 minutes, you just do. It's like smoke 'em while you fucking got 'em. This is, what the fuck is this? Right? And you let that feeling wash over you because it's the only way to deal with a feeling, But then once that, that suffering, right, washes over you, you look over there at Luna, and she's panting and smiling like, all right, dumbass, we're going this way, but whatever, and you realize I've got choices here. Now, I just made it through as many thorns as I've got to go through, right? And while I thought I'd reached my I've had it point, in reality, I came through just fine. I mean, yeah, fucking cut up, but not wounded, I knew I was going to get through some thorns, right? And I knew there's going to be some wounds. I didn't anticipate how fucking far they went, like, fuck, man. Let me climb up and, no, it's all as far as you can see, man. It's that moment in your suffering, that I'm trying to, I guess, hit upon that serves as a gate, a very literal one when we're talking about this seeking higher consciousness, seeking communication and consciousness with God, with spirit, with, all of these words which are translations of realities which we can't concretize with our senses. So I try not to too often with words, except is my experience. It's how I translated it to me. But when you're in that moment, man, and the thorns, you got many choices. And as I've already described, you might light your American Spirit menthol and just fucking realize you've been out here alone enough to fucking know that you've got to handle this. There's no, don't even have a weapon. I can't get out of this anyhow, You've just got to deal with it. So you do that, and you let it wash, right? And you don't wallow in it, but you feel that defeat. And you feel that powerlessness. And in there, you reach out to that thing that's outside of you, that's bigger than you. And in your own way, you go, all right, what the fuck? Because I don't even have the resources or the strength, right? And you find your way back to that moment that you had when you first, not an hour ago, started this journey. And time's relative, An hour through inch-long thorns is relatively, it's long. It's very long. But that attitude that carried you all the way to this current breaking point is right there. It's just you. It's there again. And often the route there is humor. That's why a sense of humor, especially about one's self, is a source of strength beyond all measure, right? Because then you can see the reality of your situation, and you can find humor in it. I'm there in those thorns, and I can see outside and around me. There's a world, and there's people that would not understand what the fuck. I'm out back of some old Mason lodge up in North Elmore County, and I was like, I'll just go investigate the woods, and they felt pulled, and you can see all of that, and you can just laugh at yourself because you know what you're doing here. You know what you're finding out about yourself. You're testing. And you're acting out and living through these fucking allegories for the real things you were going through. And at that point that you're writing a map for yourself. to remember how to stay in this place where you can find contact with this guidance, this source of strength, you know? And then you can laugh at these thorns because you know the shit you're really walking through out there, and that you're in here, you know, out here with him to escape, and your dog, and the spirits of the wild, the natives, you know, everything I was finding to connect to. And then you mostly just can laugh because you know and you've learned that there's strength, like real strength. Again, I know this is a great allegory, but I'm telling you about a real moment behind fucking Mason Lodge up in Elmore County, and thick-ass thorns that went on forever. You know, young baby pines that go on forever, and you know, you get like 8 feet of thorns. And I could get just high enough to see what I thought was a clearing. I thought. But it wasn't. You know, it wasn't. But you can see that this allegory that you're actually in is about this moment, is about this strength, this gate that you can cross through when the physical has beaten and broken you. You know, we're stubborn creatures, we humans, right? I think that's because it's an essential ingredient, you know. That's the only way I can rationalize, because my stubbornness has once flipped properly, you know, and towards light, right, has become quite an asset, you know. So, but it can also be, let's just talk positively about stubbornness, right? Because it was my stubbornness with these things that I knew to be true in these moments, which, granted, most men would not find themselves in by choice. Okay, but also that I think would have, if not broken or defeated, would have lost many. You know. Again, that's when I say, when Christ's map is specific enough, you know, that it is precisely what is. I mean, that's why his son had to do it. You know, nobody else was going to live that. To leave that sort of map, it's like why the ancients try to communicate in stone. You know, if you want a map to last, just put it in a life. You know, like, all right, well, we'll tell the story, and whether you realize it or not, you're still going to have the map. You know, and if people will just understand that that's indeed what it was. You know, and again, my experience, guys. Right, you're my experience. Right. You when I talk publicly about the words I use for my experience, I please, you know, understand. It's words, fucking words, man. And, you know, it's just when I'm telling these stories, and as you can see, emotional and trying to be authentic with it, it doesn't work to take the time to like translate to another word, you know. So I just use the words and the truths that were my experience, right? But again, in that, if we're talking about spiritual realities, and if you are one who is engaged in such realities, and I know I speak to nearly everyone whose story I know in this chat. That's yet another reason I try to speak so, you know, openly, right? Is I know that it translates to you. I already know, because I know many things about each of you, right? And you know what I mean when I say that if you're wanting to grow in these things, you will have what a human being might call trials, right? Now, a word, how that thought, how I deal with it is, it's more like trust, right? We all understand from human experiences what trust is. We understand broken trust. So much some of us understand broken trust so much that we say that's human nature, right? I used to say I would just let people show me how far I could trust them. I'd keep putting it out there, you know. Most people show you that $500 is about it's about as far as you should trust them, right? So maybe that is your experience. But either way, you understand the importance of trust in any relationship, teacher, student, human relationships, partners, friends. Okay, well, as I might say with God, as you might say with spirit, again, you know, guys, I just like to stress for new people popping in, you know, I want this to be for everybody. So whatever words you want to use, right? But I got to talk from me. You know what I mean? Okay. So this relationship is just that, and that occurred to me early on. You know, and trust goes both ways, right? So I, being human, wanted to see that indeed, first, yes, I put my trust out, but what do I need? I need then to see, okay, the things you said, well, they'll happen if I do. Yep, okay. Okay, that worked. I did what I said I'd do, and you did what you said you'd do. Okay. Now the trust is, right? I mean, I did put everything, but shit, I'm going to put more now, so what? You know, that's how it works. And you're like, trust. Okay, well, imagine that going both ways. Not only do you need for the unseen to build trust, but same goes for you. You've got to exhibit trustworthy behavior, right? And while perhaps materially in my sight, it you know, in my experience, I then chased that, right? Once you find yourself in this torn place where you're like, okay, I fucking got suffering now. It's just pain. Fine, I'm good with pain, you know, whatever, you know, and tell me a joke, shit. You know? We'll figure it out. Once you get to that level with it operationally, then indeed you get to this place. You see, guys, I'm trying very diligently to translate properly because I get to a place now, once I'm through these moments I tried to spend a minute describing vaguely. But through that thorn field, let's go back to that analogy, right? I call it a gate because then once patterns of trust are established, right? Once confidence by you and by the unseen, right, are established, and once you get through these very real thorn fields, that saying then of pain is necessary, suffering is optional, it takes on something else. Because once you're through that gate successfully, right, now you're out of the thorn field. You're back home. You got a fire lit, a hot bath, picked everything out of you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're through it. I gained a lot, right? And anybody else would have seen it, looked at it, it's gone insane. You know, would have said that's insane, right? I did have one dude that kind of knew about some things I did without when he shouldn't have, you know. You know, these tools. And he said, I knew what you were doing, you know. And as you saw a minute ago, maybe I didn't even, you know fully what I was doing. Because you saw me just sort of acknowledge and release some of that acknowledgement here with you, right? But I did know at the time I was picking up. I didn't know I was going to be fucking explorer, shaman, Jason, you know, guy here, Institute for Natural Philosophy. I was like way far away from where the fuck I was in, right? But I knew that figuring out like testing myself physically and like finding out how far I could go with this amazing dog, Luna, this German Shepherd that could do anything, you know, and I knew that stretching my ability to explore the landscape, you know, I knew all of these things were tools that I was acquiring. how to survive out there, trust that I could just, you drop me and I'd sort it out wherever, like, so I knew I could do that, right? Like I knew those aspects, but I certainly consciously didn't quite pick up, as strongly as I probably do now, that I was also just reflecting, making a physical experience that reflected my real experience, and showing myself that when it was that in this representation, by going through these thorns, that I was indeed showing myself I could do that shit with all the pain and suffering in real life too, And that's exactly what it is. And then we're sitting here with the show talking about and sort of alchemizing these points, right? The show I watched earlier, the reason I'm using this word gate was alluding to another biblical descriptor. You hear everybody say this, like pearly gates, the pearly gates. And you're like, well, where did that come from, And so you look into it and you get your description in Revelation of pearly gates, right? Well, the subject matter was sort of about pearls, right? And how pearls are formed. And so the idea was presented that perhaps the reason that these gates, as described in Revelation, were of pearl was precisely that, because pearls come from irritants, and irritants being sort of a substitute in this, allegory for, like, as he said here, Christ's suffering, right, on this little roadmap, this shamanic calling roadmap, right? And you go, okay, so that works, so that the pearl came from this irritant, just like the mother pearl gets excreted, right? And so you've got this gate made of this thing that the person then says is like an allegory for the suffering, right? And I thought that was very adept at whatever level it was coming from, because that's what, sort of my experience has been in accessing, right, these realities, is that there is something you could loosely call the suffering gate, And I tried here today to sort of just, I didn't know I was going to talk about the thorns, but I think that thorn story works extremely well, obviously. Had me in tears, right? Because it shows, without me trying to put, again, I try not to put specifics. It shows kind of what I'm talking about in the spiritual with the physical, right? So just as I came out of those physical thorn field, I mean, I went on to a buddy's house, and by this point, the very few people I had in my life I could go to, they knew the minimum. I'd show up any kind of way, covered in mud or blood from thorns, but that it had nothing. It was something in nature, And if you didn't know where I was, he's in the woods, probably playing with rocks, building a fucking dam in some creek on somebody's land. I don't know, building fires, talking to God, shit. I don't, and and so there were a few places I could safely show up in that condition and not be questioned, which is all I needed going through all of this, were a few safe spaces, which is all we all really need, and they were very few by intention, guys. My only safe spaces were, as you've heard me try to break down here, and I'll continue to exhibit, where we're out there, particularly by these creeks. And even though I had no idea at the time, that it would lead to the discoveries and then be sitting here today telling the story of Chief Tuscaloosa, right? Like, not my plan, right? Not that was not foreseeable, you understand, at all. It was well after all of these experiences and all of these tools were gathered that, the notion goes, well, how are you going to tell people about this? And I'm like, there's not words, like, to make it believable, there's not fucking words. And so my daughter then mentions one day, she's like, tell me about Brentcorn Creek in South Alabama, and this battle site that's never been found. And those, voice in your head just goes, hey, Jason. And you're like, I heard it. There'll be musket balls and shit, won't there? We could find it, couldn't we? I mean, you could show me, and then we'd come marching out and go, look what I got. How'd you get that? God. kind of is the only way I can say shortly, this long experience that eventually had me standing in a bunch of metal that at first I didn't understand. These experiences I explained to you earlier, one of the last ones, two of the last ones. Excuse me, that's gross. Where I was down on the creek, as I say, and just vomiting up my pain, my frustration, my desire to see this place completely nuked out of existence because it's so evil, corrupt, and crazy and in control of all that is not good. And I'm a personal victim of, not really vomiting, right? Y'all don't be grossed, but like just physically trying to like give it all over because I couldn't handle it. Like this was not something I couldn't swallow, right? Like you got to take this shit, right? All right, that very creek, right? That's where Mobilla is, right? I mean, I start recognizing the power of that place as I'm there releasing, all of this suffering and this pain so that I can get out of the suffering, right? And get back to the objective now. And I start doing my thing, paying attention to the native. And there's a lot of native in this creek, right? And that's like got me happy. Like, oh, the power of this place is also a lot of native presence. Awesome, And then I start finding all this metal. And I can't really tell. It's just little bits at first, I'm like, it's weird. I don't like pollution in my native stuff, And then I find little like bubbles of it, like broken on one end and like hollow. And I'd be like, what the fuck is this? Maybe it's natural. And like they were breaking it open and they were telling Charlotte, maybe they like stored pigment in it or something, because it's so not like, what the fuck is this? And then it grows to the point, to where you realize it's everywhere and it's big hunks and that's a piece of something. That's a piece of something. And that's been melted. What? Let me start doing a little research. Oh, DeSoto burned his own shit. Oh, okay, here. Oh, got it, right? And that's sort of like one paragraph attempt at how that transpired, that journey I took through the pain gate, which is probably better than suffering gate, but I should know because I think once you get through that gate is when the suffering, you're able to control it then, You're able to control it then. And you're able to take home that pain is necessary, suffering is optional. What's up, Edward Schlumberger? I just looked down at my chat. Thank you, everybody that dropped in. I told myself I'd do 45 minutes because we need to leave time for everybody to get over to Universe Unveiled. And we will continue to pick up these themes, right? And just have these thought experiments together. Just yet another aspect of what I'm trying to do with this platform, finding things within and without, is not only present the things I found without, but the things I found within. And then how the things that I found within led to being confirmed without, right? And then how I found myself in a position of going, well, how the fuck am I going to tell everybody about this? And I went, oh yeah, okay, well, finding some shit that everybody's been looking for using these tools would be a pretty accurate way to accomplish it. And that's what I then gave myself over to, and allowed myself to be forfeit for the process of never-ending change and amalgamation, whatever words you want to use, shaping by creator, Part of the reason I use the word shaman, and part of the reason to me, what, for all the things that religion might like to ascribe to Christ, it's funny to me, the one thing they don't ascribe is the one thing I found to be most true. And that's that he gave his life to be an example that would work for anyone, no matter what cross you fucking found yourself stuck to. Right? And it's odd to me that's sort of left out of everything that claims to be related to the man. But if anything, all I was saying here today was that I found that example to be the most accurate. The one that when I translated it to my own suffering and pain, I found worked as fucking advertised. You know? I don't even want to posit the why on the suffering. Why are we that way? Why is this place? I don't know. Maybe it's because in the eternal place, suffering is just not an option. And so it's best to use it for its alchemical processes here on the soul, you know? It's a worthy as goal as any to any individual soul caught here on the suffering stage. It's 11:44. I'm gonna go get some more coffee, and I'm gonna go hop in the chat with my sister partners, Jacqueline and Sarah, over at Universe Unveiled, doing their sweet Sunday news, which they have often guested myself upon. So I am partial, but I do agree with Ricardo when he says one of the best show on the web. And I think, you know, what he's really after there is so much of the ineffable, so much of who these people are, you know, and the why behind, and the story behind, and the personality and the character behind the people that are attempting to make contact and tell stories and talk to people in this podcasting format, you know, is that they're what you want, you know, like that complete package when you're talking about people who are honest and authentic and are what they say, mean what they say, walk the walk, talk the talk, stay true to themselves, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There's my plug for my besties over at Universe Unveiled. We've got a Mars panel later today, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, I think. We'll mostly be listening, I believe, to Dr. John Brandenburg speak on, what is it, nuclear isotopes on Mars. So science nerds, get ready. We're going to the micro evidence on Mars later this afternoon. All right, guys. I don't want to leave everybody with a bad vibe because obviously you always see me, you know, singing and laughing and dancing in all our shows. And, you know, the end result is what's behind me, which is more truths about the story of our past. And as any of you who have listened to me for any amount of time hear me constantly repeat, our best future, the future you're going to leave in your kids' hands and my kids' hands, our best future requires the truth of our past for many, many-fold reasons. It not only dismantles the matrix, it's like one of the fucking, you know, David to Goliath blows to each individual level of consciousness when you're able to take on board where you really, you know, the truth of where we're at. House is getting busy and awake. I'm going to sign off. Our best future requires the truth of our past. We'll see you guys on several shows throughout the day. Thanks for joining and listening. And I'm going to get some notes off to Riverside. We'll see you guys soon.